And on my countenance today, you'll just let me know.
And here we are in the Ways and Means Committee room. It is Wednesday, April 22nd. It's 11 a.m. and we are hearing from Ted Burnett from the Joint Fiscal Office, who just finished an exciting new issue brief on demographics.
Yay.
Ted Burnett, Joint Fiscal Office. So yes, exciting issue brief talking about Vermont's demographics as of July 1, 2024. I will, since some of the demographic pieces we will be talking about intersect with federal policy, we'll highlight, right, that we're nonpartisan and we're simply talking about the data. But yes, high level looks. So, right, we all know Vermont's population swell right after the pandemic. It was about 4,100 people between 2020 and 2021. Increases in 2022 and 2023 were more modest, a couple hundred. But in 2024, there was actually a slight population decrease. It's the first decrease since 2019, so before the pandemic. The overall population was just shy of 650,000 people, 648, 493. The preliminary results from 2025, you might have seen some news articles talking about the updated July 1 information. This shows a more substantial decrease from 2024 to 2025. About this, the state lost about 1,800 people. And so, yes, this issue brief is reflective of the 2024 data. I mentioned the data from 2025 is preliminary. We will update over the summer to incorporate 2025 data, and we'll go in more detail on those data and the different components of change, but this is 2024. Yeah, so let's dig into it. So this is one of my favorite things the census puts out. It breaks demographic changes into various components of change. And so we have births, deaths, and so those two components are referred to as natural change in population. And then there's international and domestic net migration. And so it allows you to see two different kind of pieces of demographic changes. First of all, what's happening more naturally. And then second of all, the people entering or leaving the state on net. And so looking, and we'll go into more detail on each component, but looking at the 2023 to 2024 data, this trend has showed up since the pandemic that the natural rate of the natural change in population is negative year over year. So there are more deaths than births. And then that natural rate of change is weighed against a net increase in migration, particularly international migration. From 2020 to 2024, you're seeing a more augmented, right, natural rate of change every year. Deaths were more than births, and so this adds up to almost 6,800, a negative rate of natural change of 6,800, and then almost, yeah, so over 12,000 people added through both international and domestic migration. And I want to emphasize the international part because I feel like a lot of our news articles talk about domestic migration. And so both international and domestic migration from 2020 to 2024 were about equal in terms of their contribution to the state's population.
Are you going to get into how international migration might be slowing in the future?
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely.
I'll stay tuned for that.
So yes, as I mentioned, positive net migration kept Vermont's population growing. And so yes, since 2020, Vermont has experienced substantially more domestic migration, in-migration than out-migration. And so the net total was of domestic migration was 6,160 people. However, that trend reversed between 2023 and 2024, where 500 people more people moved out of Vermont than moved into Vermont. And international migration, that in Vermont, an increase of 2,000 people, 2,000 new Vermonters from 2023 to 2024, and more than 6,000 between 20 and 2024. The early data for 2025 show a much smaller increase in international immigration. So on net, compared to the 2,000 people figure, about 600. And so that's a pretty strong reason why, Vermont lost about 500 people between 2023 and 2024, and then lost more than 1,800 people between 2024 and 2025. And the decrease in international migration is a huge reason that changed. And looking further into the crystal ball, that rate is likely to be even smaller for 2025 into 2026. National level estimates place international migration to decrease even further as a result of federal actions. So going into natural change in more detail, 2020, between 23 and 24, there were slightly more than 5,000 first residents. The number of deaths was 6,700 people. And so net natural population change of 1,723. So again, emphasizing that without migration, Vermont's population would have decreased by more than 1,700 people. And yes, immigration was especially important during the pandemic and was a major explainer for our population increase.
Those are numbers.
Yep.
There's nothing like exit polling for the people that are moving in or moving out, right? As to determine why.
If only we had a toll, we would be able to do that.
Sure.
Yes, and I know, right, there are quite a few, specified like thoughts as to why that might be. It might be the housing crisis, it might be affordability concerns, there's a whole host of things, but yeah, we don't have good data on why folks are choosing to move elsewhere. It could be lifestyle changes, it could be return to work orders, there's a lot of possible explanations.
I guess we don't know where they're moving to, do we?
We would know where they are moving. Let me look into it. There are
There's like
better and worse.
Study, right?
What's that?
That study.
Oh, United Airlines. They publish data every year. I was going to say there are like different sources of data, and I'll start with the census and then go to the United Airlines afterwards. So the other piece is, so this is where the first part was looking at changes in different components of populations. The second piece is looking at the overall age structure in Vermont, and how that how changes are happening by different age cohorts and groups. And so here we have a table that shows the difference between different age groups in 2020 and 2024. And so during the pandemic, there were increases in folks between the ages of 25 and 39, and a slight increase in folks aged 40 to 54. But that increase was substantially outnumbered by the fact that there are fewer adults ages 55 to 64. And another piece here is that birth rates dropped during the pandemic and remain lower. And so the number of people in Vermont aged 0 to 17 was also lower.
Are there fewer adults 55 to 64 because they're now 65 to 75?
There's a lot of, yes, like rolling over into an older age group. Yes, that's a big part of the change. You'll see I have a graph later on that kind of shows this bubble moving into different age groups. Yes, exactly.
I read a really interesting article over the weekend, maybe, about how it seems like they're sort of it seems like people are having the same number of babies as they have, but they're having them later. And it's like that sort of demographic, like sort of catching up with the demographics and a little. So curious to see how that's going to play itself out in Vermont.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think there was, for example, in Maine, where there was also a large pandemic era influx of folks, there was like a slight change in birth rates. You were starting to see like folks moving to Maine, starting families and et cetera. And not enough.
Not there.
Yeah, we're not there yet. Yep. So we're going to talk about our different generational cohorts here, starting with baby boomers. So these are folks who were born between 1946 and 1964. They were aged 56 to 74 in 2020, right? So yes, straddling those two different age groups referenced in the previous slide. And so the key point here is that as we move along in time, an increasing number of Vermonters will enter that later age group, showing the change showing the change from 55 to 64 and then 65 to 79. And that's beyond traditional working years, right? And that has impact on state revenues, state services that might be needed, et cetera. We'll get into that later. And so, yes, between 2020 and 2024, the 65 to 79 cohort saw an increase of more than 13%. That was the largest increase of any age cohort. So really big group of baby boomers moving along and aging. And so, yes, it's showing up in our different buckets that we've created for ages. Next is Gen X. And so they are the biggest, so Gen Xers, right, are defined as those born 1965 to 1980. They are primarily showing up in our 55 to 64 age group, and that decreased almost 8,500, again, as folks are aging to the next cohort. And so these are folks who are later career Vermonters who will be aging out of their traditional working years, starting to retire. So seeing changes in income tax returns or income tax generation.
Another question I have is, a few years ago, we had a program where I think it was paying the fees to come to Vermont. Is there any information on how many actually came to Vermont and took advantage of that? Or was it a failure?
As many groups to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that you were the presenter of the bill.
I was not. No, I was serving on House Commerce at the time, and it was in a conference committee that a deal was struck saying you get to use X amount of dollars for the Senate's relocation program, and the House got to use X number of dollars, the same amount of dollars, or I think it was a career technical education program, something. So if you ask the proponents, they'll say it was worth the squeeze because of all the media that it got and to get people to think about Vermont.
Okay. Very good.
I talked to a bunch of people who are moving here anyway. We're thrilled to have us pay their moving expenses.
Yes. Yes. It went for 2 years, I think, maybe 3. Yeah. So the Agency of Commerce Community Development did develop reports based on surveys of people that did take advantage of it that showed that it was impactful on the decision to move. So you could read that. No.
Yes, I was going to bring up the counterfactual on how hard it is to understand how influential it was to the decision to move to Vermont. I will note to that report from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development, our office published kind of a short memo outlining some of the data challenges within that report. So it's a involved in controversial history and trying to figure out how effective the program was in influencing people's decisions.
Didn't DFR actually do the report for the program, and then JFO wrote an analysis about DFR's report?
Yes, that may be true. Yes. Yep.
Yeah, and then there was a report on the report on the report after that.
And how can we find those reports?
I can dig them up and send them to Source and she'll send them to you all. Yep.
Thank you. Does the report include the total cost of this program?
Yes, it would have the number of people who took advantage of it and yes, the amount of.
Yeah.
Um, Not to prolong this, but how many stayed in the long run? Did they come and saw and then left or what, you know?
That is I think you would need a long-term follow-up report if you wanted to track that particular piece of data. It's hard to know.
Okay. Very nice. Thank you.
So offended too.
I'm going to breeze through the slide because I've already gone over a lot of the content in it. In the 25 to 39 age group and 40 to 54 age group, there were some increases in those population groups. A portion of this was certainly in migration from the pandemic period, and some folks are choosing to stay, it seems like, in the data.
Sorry, when does the 25 data come available? I only ask because some of the 20 early school data suggests that particularly some second hometowns are losing kids right now, which would be consistent with people who relocated and then left during the pandemic.
Yeah, so a lot of it is available. The final piece we require to do the demographics issue brief is the population estimates for individual years. And so they release it on a schedule. A lot of it's already out. And there are some county data. I will flag that county data can be really noisy because you're dealing with really small sample sizes. So if you're seeing,
Are often bigger than the.
yes. So yeah, as part of my schoolwork, I was reading a paper talking about the dangers of small sample census data and interpreting that. So yeah. But yes, I think we have a lot of it, and there may be a piece or two missing to do this particular issue brief, but yes. So finally, the numbers of both very young and school age children dropped from 2020 to 2024. 0 to 4 dropped by about 2,200 or 7.7%. So right, a larger change. It's a smaller age group. So we have ages 5 to 17 fell by 3,450 or about 3.8%. And so this is getting into more of the fun part. This shows, the graph shows by the amount of people by each single year of age. And so what this shows is a lot of the trends I've been talking about in simply static numbers. You can see here, so the blue line is the numbers for 2020, the green line is 2024. And so the first piece is this last slide. The numbers for each single year of age in 2020 are higher than 2024, showing the decrease in birth rates, or yes, folks deciding to start families later. Then as you move into it,
Finish your sentence.
okay, as you move to 18 to 24, you see the spike in college age students. And I will stop here before we move along on the chart for the question.
I didn't mind to interrupt your thought.
Of course.
I just wanted to get in queue. How does Tom, the information on this chart reflect with northeast wise, for example, trends?
That is a good question. So we are very demographically similar to Maine in many ways. And so you would see different numbers on the y-axis, just reflecting different
Okay.
population totals. But you would see kind of a similar increase in baby boomers later in the chart. Maine would be more similar. I'm not sure about other northeastern states, but I can certainly send along. I'm sure there's another popular way these data are presented is kind of in you've seen the chart, the bar charts that
Sure.
kind of go
Oh, yeah,
horizontal, and you see the bump in certain age groups, and I'm sure they're available for other states to compare.
The reason for the question has to do with our business climate. And as you know, we've taken quite a bit of testimony about that, and I'm just curious to see where there are link ups, I guess you could say, and we've had quite a bit of testimony on that. I'm just looking for more and better information, because that's always what we do here. Thank you, Ted.
Sure. Okay. Wrote that down. So yes, the spike in college age students in Vermont, remarkably similar in 2020 and 2024. And then moving on into the 25 to 39 age group, you can see this line higher in 2024 showing what we assume are immigrants due to the pandemic. And then later on in the graph, you could see that rotation as the bump of baby boomers start to age. You could see that this peak is moving along in time.
I'm very struck, and I don't know if I'm seeing something where there isn't something, so please correct me.
Mhm.
That it looks like there's a very smooth line between 0 to 17 and 25 to 39, rather than like, I understand the 18 to 24 is folks who come here for college.
Mhm.
But that there isn't even any rebasing at all at that point. It's very striking to me.
That it just
Like, I came here for college and stayed. I frankly, a
Right.
huge number of my friends where I live came here for college or graduate school and stayed. And it doesn't seem like that's even slightly a demographic happening.
that is, yeah.
And I don't know if it's balanced out from people who leave to go to college and like the math just works out perfectly. That seems weird.
Yes, and I wonder, right, like these are in the 18 to 24 age group that like it's folks have made their decisions about where they're gonna live at like 25, 26, and so the decline stops. And then that's the folks who've made their decision are staying in Vermont more long-term. Would be that folks would stay in Vermont, right? So like you graduate college, 22, some of these folks are staying, but more of them are like at 23 and 24.
And I'm more seeing how similar the numbers are between age 17 and age 25.
17. Oh, I see. There's like, yeah, if you like really squint,
Oh.
maybe it's like slightly higher.
Yeah.
But yeah,
That's
yes, I do. Right, I do know, I similarly hear of folks who are, make it to Vermont and decide it's wonderful here and decide to stay. So, yeah, interesting point. And so this next graph shows the shares of Vermont's population by age group. So converting these, putting these, rather than single year of age, putting folks into their constituent age groups and showing overall what percentage of Vermont's overall population each age group represents. And it's reinforcement for the trends we've been talking about throughout the presentation, right? You could see that as birth rates decline, folks who and there are just fewer children aged 0 to 17, the representative share of Vermont's population has decreased between 20 and 2024, remained relatively static for 18 to 24, 25 to 39, and 40 to 54. And then the striking aging out of folks moving from the 55 to 64 to 65 to 79 age group. And to me, it's remarkable how quickly that is happening year over year. And you're also seeing a smaller but noticeable increase in the number of folks who are over 8 years old.
Didn't we lose a bunch of colleges in that? Maybe that was also.
Yeah, but they all had like, I mean, probably with all the colleges that we lost, we're talking about like 1,500 per year, because they're all tiny, tiny colleges. But yeah,
No, that's our population.
yes, no, true.
That's enough to show up as a change, percent change. Yeah. So I mean, my point is, there could be people staying just offset by the lost colleges.
And so compared to the United States, we have a lower share of children, so 0 to 17, compared to the US overall. We do have a higher percentage of folks who are college age in Vermont. There are a lot of folks who come to Vermont for college. And then we have a smaller share of young and middle-aged adults than the US overall by a couple percent. And then we have a much higher share of folks who are 55 to 64 and 65 to 79 than the US overall. And then finally, we have a larger share of folks who are over the age of 80. And there is if you prefer to see things in charts, there's a chart in the demographics issue brief that compares age groups to the US overall. And so moving on into the consideration section, I think the question I spent the most time thinking about as I was going to the issue brief this summer and fall is, will our population growth, will that spike in population after the pandemic, will it continue? And this is why I liked thinking about the components of population change so much. If you break these into each of their constituent parts, each of them show headwinds for Vermont's overall demographics, right? So the relatively low birth rates are likely to continue. That's a kind of a structural aspect. And it's not just a Vermont problem. The birth rates nationally have been decreasing over time. The fact that we are older, unfortunately, is a fact of life that we're going to lose Vermont year over year. And so the death rate is likely to stay elevated. And then there are headwinds for our net migration, federal actions, certainly. I think the net international migration, I was looking at a census estimate for the overall United States. It hit 2.7 million people in 2024 as of July 1, was 1.3 million in 2025, and it's estimated to decline again to about like 300,000 people for 26. And so certainly, this was a major piece that was powering Vermont's population increase. And so we're just, it's unlikely to continue to see the same numbers there. And then also, before the pandemic, domestic migration into Vermont was negative. We're starting to see that trend return. And so for 2024's data and for 2025, Vermont lost people to other states. And so if that trend continues, it's just, there's not a single piece of the component population change that shows, gives any, like, if you're looking for population growth, it's hard to find it in the different components of change. And so this is thinking through the aging of Vermont's population and how that might impact state revenues. This is a consideration that's been in previous briefs, but carried it forward because it's a trend that's continuing. Folks in the 45 to 64 age group pay the highest effective tax rate. These are folks who are in later stages in their career. They're at the peak of their earnings. And so as folks move out of their working years and retire, their incomes might go down. So personal income tax collections may decrease. there might be lower sales tax revenues as well. So folks who are older maybe spending on healthcare, maybe spending more on services. Those are either they're not subject to the services aren't subject to the sales tax. And so, yes, there may be decreases in consumption taxes as well.
So your top line is only about personal income tax, right?
Yes, so this one is, yep, that's reflective of personal income tax. Since we're doing a tax study this summer, we'll have an update for that number too.
I have a question, that last sentence there. Have you tried recently to put an elderly parent into a good nursing home? They are
Thankfully, I've not.
glad you haven't. You don't. They are hard to come by. So if we have so many people old, like 80 or older, why don't we have that service then? Why, what's the holdup there?
My understanding is that the state, so a couple of years ago, our Human Services Committee set in process a sort of statewide strategic plan for creating exactly that kind of infrastructure and services you need. And the Department of Aging and Independent Living is actually doing like a series of public hearings to update it right now. I just saw notice of it recently. And so I think that's all. I mean, Ted can answer the question about why the market is not providing, but the sort of the state's responsibility for that, I think, is very much in progress to understand.
Okay, I'm glad to hear that.
We've also lost a few nursing homes over the years. There's 2 or 3 up where I live that have gone out of business because personnel issues and it's a difficult business to run and to get people to work there.
Rate increases. Of it.
And then you have the issue of some of the hospitals taking in some of those patients because they can't find beds in nursing homes. So it's a difficult situation. So stay healthy.
Bottom line.
Yeah.
Yes, and I am not a healthcare policy expert by any means. And yeah, Nolan would probably have better context, but I was going to cite workforce kind of challenges as the thing I could think of top of mind. So glad that was mentioned. So given that there are a lot of headwinds from components of change in Vermont's demographics, are there policy that can be implemented, considered to help Vermont's economy adapt? One is thinking through the types of services that make Vermont attractive to working age folks, healthcare, broadband, housing, climate change, adaptation and mitigation, right? There were certainly folks who moved to Vermont as Vermont was thought of as a climate refuge and as, the climate was quite rough out west with wildfires. And so, yes, that is one possible area of investigation. And then the other side is thinking through comprehensive approaches to support aging population across a whole variety of dimensions. And yes, there's the state, I think, plan for aging that really does take a comprehensive look at how to support folks. So.
Somebody mentioned recently where migration regarding climate change Vermont was considered one of the best places to move to avoid climate change effectiveness on people. I don't know whether that's going to have a future effect It might, if things worsen out west and south, that do. But then again, where are we gonna put them? Because we don't have the housing infrastructure.
Yes, and a lot of that, I know, thinking through climate change and folks' decisions to move here, some of the analysis in Vermont's relative safety didn't do a great job of analyzing like flooding type events. And so the floods of 2023 and 2024, there were some kind of national pieces talking about, Vermont being seen as a climate refuge and that picture being complicated by, a series of summer tragedies. So complicated.
Anyone, have any other questions? Anything else you want to tell us?
We will have an update for 2025. Starting to, brainstorm. If, you have questions or things you're interested in regards to demographics, certainly reach out and we can think through how to potentially incorporate that in future briefs. Why we want these to be responsive to what y'all are thinking about, certainly. Yes, and thinking through one idea, talking about in the office just today is putting Vermont's changes in context with what's happening, doing a better job regionally and then nationally, like percentage rates of change. So yeah, that's on tap.
Thank you.
Of course.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. It's a fun topic.
Yes. And Representative Odie, who I think was the one who's most excited about this, is catching up and watching from home. She texted me yesterday when she got to the moment where I said, could someone update? So thank you. We are done for the morning. We are back here after the floor and we will work on S327 and talk about veggie, everyone's favorite representative.